I want to start at the end. Not because the beginning doesn't matter, it does, but because you need to know where I'm sitting before I take you back to where I was. I am sitting in a neurologist's office in Nashville, Tennessee. It is a Tuesday in March. The doctor across from me, Dr. Priya Anand, whose diplomas line the wall with the quiet authority of someone who earned every one of them, has just finished reviewing 2 years of cognitive assessments, medication records, and the results of the most comprehensive neurological evaluation I have had in my life. She folds her hands on the desk, and she tells me there is nothing wrong with my mind. Not a shadow. Not an early marker, not a single finding that supports the diagnosis my son has been sharing with family members, adjusting my medications around, and using to quietly reshape every major decision in my life for the past 24 months. Nothing. My mind is, in Dr. Anand's precise language, entirely intact. I nod. I open my purse. I take out a journal, green cover, college ruled, the same kind I used for lesson plans for 35 years, and I place it on the desk between us. I thought you might want to see this, I say. But before I tell you what's in that journal, I need to know who's with me right now. Drop your city in the comments. Whether you're in Tennessee or Texas or anywhere in between, I want to know where this story finds you today, because I suspect some of you have been waiting a long time to hear something like what I'm about to tell you. I'm Ruth Calloway, retired English teacher, 35 years at Jefferson High School in Knoxville, Tennessee, mother of one, grandmother of one, widow of Gerald Calloway, who taught history at the same school and who would have found all of this deeply unsurprising. My son's name is Nathan. He is 44 years old. He is a physician, internal medicine, well-regarded, genuinely skilled. And for 2 years, he told me and everyone around me that I was losing my mind. He was very convincing. He is a good doctor. What he forgot, though, what he perhaps never fully understood, is that I spent 35 years teaching people how stories work, and I recognized this one from the very first page. It started after Gerald died. November, 3 years ago. Heart attack. Sudden, as they often are, the kind where there is no warning and no goodbye, and you spend the first several weeks afterward thinking he must be in the other room. Nathan was attentive in those first months. He called every day. He drove up from Chattanooga on weekends. He sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee and asked the right questions, and I was grateful, genuinely grateful for a son who showed up. I should have paid closer attention to what he was showing up for. The first suggestion came 4 months after Gerald's funeral. We were sitting at that same kitchen table. Nathan had brought folders. He does this, arrives with folders, which creates the impression of a conversation that has already been decided. "Mom," he said, "I've been thinking about your situation." I asked him what situation he meant. Being alone in this house, managing everything yourself. He opened a folder. "Dad handled a lot of the finances. I just want to make sure you're not overwhelmed." I told him I was not overwhelmed. I had managed our finances jointly with Gerald for 41 years, and independently before that. He nodded the way people nod when they've decided not to argue with you yet. He left the folders. I read them after he drove away. They were preliminary documents, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, the kind of paperwork that is entirely reasonable to have in order and entirely unreasonable to present 4 months after your father's death on a Saturday morning without being asked. I put them in a drawer. I did not sign them. The next visit, Nathan mentioned I'd seemed distracted on our last phone call. The visit after that, I'd repeated a story, he said, told him the same thing twice. I tried to remember doing this. I couldn't. But Nathan said it with such gentle certainty, the tone of a physician delivering difficult news to a patient he cares about, that I found myself doubting my own recollection. That was the first time. It would not be the last. Looking back, and I have looked back, carefully, the way you look back at a text when you're trying to understand how the author built toward an ending you didn't see coming, the story had already begun. I just hadn't recognized the genre yet. The medications began 8 months after Gerald died. Nathan had taken over coordinating my care. My primary physician, Dr. Harmon, was retiring, and Nathan suggested a colleague of his, younger, thorough, someone who would give me excellent care. I trusted this. He was my son. He was a doctor. The new doctor adjusted my blood pressure medication, added a mild anti-anxiety prescription, said it would help with sleep, with the grief. Within 6 weeks, I noticed differences. The edges of things were softer, not unpleasantly at first, like the world had turned its brightness down slightly. I slept more. I moved more slowly through mornings that used to be sharp. I mentioned this at my next appointment. The doctor noted it, said adjustment periods were normal, that my body was recalibrating. Nathan, on the phone that evening, said, "The doctor called me. He said you seemed a little confused at the appointment today." I had not been confused. I had raised a concern. These are different things. But I wrote it off. Grief does strange things. Gerald had been gone 8 months, and I was still reaching for the phone to call him about small things, the weather, a book I'd read, something funny one of my former students had posted online. Perhaps I was confused. Perhaps Nathan was right. I want to stop here and tell you something about what it feels like to have your own perception systematically undermined by someone you love. It doesn't feel like an attack. That's the terrible thing. It feels like concern. It feels like care. It feels like a son who loves his mother and is worried about her, who shows up with folders and gentle voices and the particular authority of medical credentials. It feels like being helped. Until the morning you wake up and reach for a thought that used to be right there, quick, reliable, yours, and find it just slightly out of reach. And the person standing beside you says, "See, this is what I've been worried about." That morning came for me on a Tuesday in October. I was trying to remember the name of a Chekhov story. I knew it. It was right there, and it wasn't. Nathan was in the kitchen. He heard me struggling. He came to the doorway, and he looked at me with such practiced, sorrowful compassion, the look of a doctor who had been right all along, that something in me went very quiet, and something else in me went very still, and those two things were not the same. I taught a unit on dramatic irony every year. The moment when the audience knows something the character doesn't, or the reverse, the moment when the character knows something the audience doesn't yet. I taught it using Othello, using Iago, the way a skilled manipulator works, not through force, but through suggestion, through the slow, patient construction of an alternative reality, through making the target doubt what they see with their own eyes. I taught this for 35 years, and on a Tuesday in October, standing in my own living room, unable to retrieve the name of a Chekhov story while my son watched from the doorway with his physician's sorrow, I recognized the genre. Not fully, not immediately, but the way you recognize a melody before the words come back. Something in the structure of what was happening had a shape I knew. The prescription changes that always followed Nathan's visits, the appointments with a doctor I hadn't chosen, The gentle, consistent, ever-present narrative of my decline offered always just slightly ahead of any symptom I could actually identify in myself. The folders, the paperwork, the conversations held just slightly outside my earshot that stopped when I entered the room. I stood in my living room, and I thought, I have taught this story. I know how Iago works. I know what the handkerchief is for. Now, I want to be careful here, because what I'm describing is the moment of recognition, not the moment of certainty. I did not know, standing in that living room, exactly what Nathan was doing or why. I did not know if it was conscious or if it was something more complicated than that. What I knew was this: the story had a structure, and the structure was one I recognized. I went to my desk. I found a green journal, college-ruled, the same kind I'd used for lesson plans for 35 years. I opened to the first page. I wrote the date, and then I wrote, October 14th, Iago continues his work. The subject grows more confident in his diagnosis. Note, subject used the phrase, "We just want what's best for you," 4 times in 11 minutes. Othello, Act 3. I closed the journal. I put it in the drawer under my winter sweaters, and I went back to the living room, and I let Nathan make me tea, and I did not let him see anything change in my face. 35 years of teaching. You learn to control your expression when a student thinks they've gotten away with something. I want to tell you about the journal. Not just what was in it, but what it felt like to write it. For 2 years, I had been performing a version of myself that was smaller, slower, more uncertain than the woman I actually was. Not constantly. I couldn't sustain it constantly, and frankly, it wasn't required. Nathan didn't need me to perform confusion at all times. He only needed the narrative to exist. The story of Ruth Calloway's decline had its own momentum by then. It barely needed tending. So I had long stretches of ordinary days, and in those stretches, I wrote. Every entry followed the same structure: date, observation, literary reference, specific language documented. October 14th was Othello. October 29th, the medication was adjusted again following a visit. No consultation with me, no explanation offered. The adjustment was presented as fait accompli. See Kafka, The Trial. The accused is never told the charge. November 11th, subject mentioned to Connie that I had seemed not quite myself at Thanksgiving. I was entirely myself. I was, in fact, watching very carefully. See Austen, Northanger Abbey. The heroine who sees clearly is called hysterical. December 3rd, Beverly called today. First real conversation in weeks. She said, and I am noting this exactly, "Ruth, you seem like yourself when Nathan is not here." I told her I was always myself. She paused. I think she heard something in that pause. See Chekhov's The Lady with the Dog. What is understood between two people in a silence. I filled 41 pages over 22 months, each one precise, each one dated, each one cross-referenced. Nathan saw the journal twice. The first time, he picked it up from the coffee table where I'd left it deliberately visible, opened it, read 3 lines, put it down. "Still doing lesson plans?" he said. "Old habits," I said. He smiled. The second time, he asked what I was writing so much lately. "Literary analysis," I said. "I'm thinking about submitting something to a journal." He nodded the way he'd nodded when he'd decided not to pursue something. I watched him decide it was harmless. I wrote an entry about that, too. January 7th, subject evaluated the journal and found it unthreatening. Iago never considers that Othello has read the play. See the entire ironic tradition in Western literature. Beverly Hutchins has been my closest friend for 28 years. We met in the Jefferson High Faculty Lounge in 1996. She taught biology. We'd disagreed about the Oxford comma for 20 years and never resolved it. She is stubborn in the way that only people who are usually right can afford to be. After Gerald died, Nathan gradually managed my social calendar the way he managed everything else, with good intentions deployed as a slow net. Friends called less, visits became less frequent, not because people stopped caring, but because Nathan was often the one relaying information about how I was doing, and the information he relayed made people uncertain how to show up. Beverly did not receive this information passively. Beverly taught biology. She understood systems. She understood that when an organism changes behavior, you look for the environmental variable that changed first. She noticed I was different when Nathan wasn't present. She came on a Wednesday afternoon in February, unannounced, the way she'd always done for 28 years, while Nathan was in Chattanooga. She brought lemon pound cake. She put the kettle on without asking. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she looked at me for a long moment. "Ruth," she said, "how are you? Actually." Not, "How are you feeling?" Not, "Nathan told me you've been having a hard time." Not the soft, managed language of someone who has already received a narrative. "How are you? Actually." I looked at my oldest friend across the table, and I said, "I think I need to see a different doctor." The way I said it, precise, clear, no hesitation, Beverly went still. "How long?" she said. 22 months, I said. She put her fork down. She asked me 2 questions. Only 2. She had always been economical with questions, a scientist's habit. First, "Are you safe?" Yes. Second, "Do you have documentation?" I got up, went to the bedroom, came back with the green journal. I put it on the table between us. Beverly picked it up, read the first entry, read the second, read 5 more. She set it down. She looked at me with the expression of a woman who has just understood something she wishes she hadn't needed to understand. "I know a neurologist in Nashville," she said. "She trained under my nephew. She is thorough and she does not equivocate." She picked up her phone. She called while the kettle was still warm. Beverly drove me to Nashville on a Thursday morning in March. We didn't tell Nathan. I want to say that plainly because I know some of you will ask, and the answer is no. I did not tell my son I was seeking a second opinion on the diagnosis he had been building around me for 2 years. I did not give him the opportunity to manage this the way he had managed everything else. Beverly and I drove 2.5 hours through Tennessee in the early spring with the windows down slightly and the radio on low, and we didn't talk much. We had said what needed saying at the kitchen table. Everything else was just miles. Dr. Priya Anand's office was on the 3rd floor of a medical building near Vanderbilt. Clean, orderly, plants that were actually alive. Dr. Anand herself was small, precise, unhurried. She shook my hand and looked at me, not through me, not past me, with the attention of someone who had decided before I sat down that I was worth her full consideration. She spent 4 hours with me. Cognitive assessments, language processing, memory mapping, a complete medication review, which required me to bring every prescription bottle I had, which I had packed in a Ziploc bag in my purse because I had anticipated this need 3 weeks earlier when Beverly made the appointment. Dr. Anand reviewed the medication combination for a long time. She was quiet in the way that physicians are quiet when something they're seeing requires them to be careful about what they say next. Then she sent me to wait in the hall while she made 2 calls. Beverly sat beside me. We didn't speak. When Dr. Anand called me back in, she sat across from me and she folded her hands in the way that I would later think of as the gesture of someone about to offer a person back something that was taken from them. "Mrs. Calloway," she said, "your cognitive function is entirely normal. There is no evidence, not a single clinical indicator of the decline you've been told to expect." The room was very quiet. The medication combination you've been prescribed is one that I would not recommend for a patient of your profile. In the dosages you've been receiving, it can produce significant confusion, memory disruption, and disorientation in older patients. She paused. These effects are reversible. I looked at her. I reached into my purse. I placed the green journal on her desk. I said, I thought you might want to see this. I need to tell you about the drive home. Beverly drove. I sat in the passenger seat with the journal in my lap and watched Tennessee pass outside the window, and I did not say anything for a long time. Beverly let me be quiet. She is good at this. The same quality that made her a good scientist made her a good friend. She did not fill the silence with reassurance. She just drove. I want to tell you something honest about what it feels like to be told that your mind is intact. You would think it would feel like relief. It does. But underneath the relief, underneath the clean, clear vindication of every instinct I had spent 2 years quietly documenting, there is something else. Grief. Not for myself, for Nathan. I have thought about this a great deal in the month since Nashville. I have turned it over in my mind the way I turn over a difficult text, looking for the interpretation that is truest, not the one that is most comfortable. And what I keep arriving at is this. Nathan is not a villain from a story. He is a man who needed control and found a mechanism for it and convinced himself, I believe genuinely in some compartment of himself, that what he was doing was care, that managing his mother was protecting her, that the diagnosis he had built was real. Because the alternative, that he had invented it, that he had sustained it, that he had used his medical authority to make his own mother doubt her mind, was too ugly to look at directly. I know this psychology. I taught it. Othello does not believe he is being manipulated. Iago does not believe he is the villain. The characters who do the most damage in literature are almost never the ones who know what they are. I sat in Beverly's car and I thought about Nathan at 9 years old, insisting to Gerald and me that he had finished his homework when he hadn't. The same precise certainty, the same constructed reality held with both hands. I thought about how much I had loved him, how much I still did. And I thought about what I was going to do with what was in that journal. Beverly pulled into my driveway. What do you need? She asked, the same question she always asked. James Whitfield's number. My attorney of 20 years. The harvest had arrived, and I was going to gather it correctly. James Whitfield read the journal in one sitting. He called me the next morning. Ruth, he said, this is the most thorough piece of personal documentation I have seen in 30 years of elder law. I told him I had been an English teacher. He said that explained it. We met 3 times over 2 weeks. James, Dr. Anand's formal findings, and the journal became the architecture of what happened next. The medication, Dr. Anand filed a formal complaint against Nathan's colleague, the prescribing physician, the one Nathan had installed. The investigation found a pattern of overprescription in elderly patients referred through Nathan's network. Nathan himself was the subject of a separate inquiry. I will not give you every legal detail, partly because some of it is still ongoing, and partly because the details are not the point. The point is what happened when I called Nathan. I called him on a Thursday evening. I told him I had been to Nashville. I told him what Dr. Anand had found. I told him about the journal. There was a long silence. Mom, he began, "I'm not finished," I said. I told him what James Whitfield was filing. I told him what the medical board inquiry would look like. I told him that Maya knew. I had called my granddaughter the morning after Nashville because she deserved the truth before the machinery of consequences began moving. Maya had cried. Then she had been angry in the clean way of someone who loves you and has been lied to on your behalf. "Mom," Nathan said again. His voice was different now. The physician's authority had gone out of it. What remained was something younger, something I hadn't heard since he was a boy. "I want you to know something before this goes where it's going." A pause. "I know you told yourself this was care. I know you constructed a version of events that let you live with what you were doing. I know because I taught that construction for 35 years, and I know exactly what it looks like from the inside." Another pause. "But I also know what it looks like from the outside." I let that sit between us on the phone for a moment. "The journal is thorough, Nathan. 41 entries. James says it's airtight." He didn't respond. "I hope," I said carefully, "that someday you'll understand the difference between managing someone and loving them." And then I said goodnight. That was 14 months ago. A great deal has happened since that Thursday evening phone call. The medications are gone, completely. Dr. Anand oversaw a careful, gradual process, and within 3 months I was sleeping the way I used to sleep, and thinking the way I used to think, and reaching for words like checkoff titles and finding them immediately, right where I left them. There is a particular joy in retrieving something you were told was lost. I recommend it. Nathan and I do not speak regularly. The legal process is ongoing, and James advises distance. But I received a letter from him 6 weeks ago, 2 pages, handwritten. He did not deny what was in the journal. He did not construct a new narrative. He said he was sorry. I read the letter 4 times. I placed it in the green journal, the last entry. Beverly and I have coffee every Wednesday now. We resolved the Oxford comma debate in her favor. I decided life is too short. Maya visits on Sundays. She's studying Middlemarch this semester, George Eliot, and we argue about Dorothea Brooke in the best possible way, the way that only happens between 2 people who both love a book enough to fight about it. I have started writing again, not lesson plans, something longer, a memoir possibly, about language and how it is used, about what it means to teach people to read stories carefully and then find yourself inside one that requires every skill you ever taught. I don't know yet if I'll publish it, but I know I'll finish it. There is a saying I came across years ago, a Hasidic proverb that I wrote on the board on the first day of every school year for the last decade of my teaching career. For the unlearned, old age is winter. For the learned, it is the season of the harvest. I put it on the board because I thought it was about knowledge, about the accumulation of learning over a lifetime. I understand it differently now. The harvest is not just what you know, it is what you do with what you know. When the moment comes, when the story reaches its turning point, and the character must decide whether to use what they have been given or let it pass unused. I did not let it pass. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had your own perception undermined by someone you trusted? Have you ever been made to feel that what you clearly knew was somehow wrong? Drop it in the comments. This is a safe room, and I read every single one. What part of Ruth's story stayed with you? The journal? The drive to Nashville? The phone call? Tell me. If someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them right now. Don't wait. Subscribe if this community is where you belong. Like this video if Ruth's story gave you something to carry. I'm Ruth Calloway, retired English teacher, 35 years in the classroom, and I am in my 2nd season. It is, without question, the best one yet.